Pat. How are you?
Doing fine, Laura.
Do you agree with my conclusion that Democrats are miserable the happier Americans are without big government?
Well, Democrats are miserable the happier Donald Trump is, that's for sure.
But they have to convince people, Pat, that things aren't really good in the United States.
They do seem to be, and of course I'm talking about the folks on television you see, who are the voices and the front persons for liberalism today, seem to be a very unhappy group, and they're apprehensive also because there's a fear, despite the polls showing Donald Trump pretty much underwater in the presidential election, they fear, I think, that the candidates they've got up there, that once they're vetted and once they're put out front and once the attack ads begin, can't really beat Trump with the American people. So I think they're fretting and they're apprehensive.
Yeah, and I think that, again, considering where the developed world's economy is, and I just went through France and, of course, Germany, which was once the powerhouse of Europe, and now is sputtering along, basically at zero growth and in recession.
Right. What you've got is, you've got the number 2 economy in the world, China, which is going through very rough times. And the president is right. There's disinvestment going on. People who've got factories in China, the cost of production has risen. It's not as competitive as it used to be. And they're looking at American tariffs to get their products into the United States. So companies are slowly saying, look, China's not what it was. The other new countries, Vietnam or Mexico or Indonesia, maybe we ought to move our factory out of here and move it down there, so we won't ever have to face the problem of American tariffs and Chinese and American troubles. So I think China's got a problem that's number 2. As you mentioned, Germany's the number 4 economy in the world, and it's not doing well. The Brits are going to have a real problem with the breakout from Brexit. It doesn't look like real growth there. They're one of the top 10. So you've got problems around the world, but you're also right in this, that if you look at the world, the United States is doing better than any of them, and the United States is doing well with unemployment where it is, I mean, below 4%, and among minorities and among women. And these folks, it's lower than it's ever been in history. So you got a lot of good things going for Americans, and there's a lot of preaching of gloom and doom. The end is near, and the sandwich boards are out in Times Square, and wish is father to the 40 here. The liberals are making novenas for a recession.
Oh, if only they were saying their novenas, I'd be happy. Pat, remember, they're against thoughts and prayers, okay? They don't want the only prayers they're doing now are praying that we get a recession. Okay, so that's their prayers. They're praying, please bring us a recession. And I think that ultimately does reveal a lot, though, about where they are as a party, that they are rooting against the American economic revival.
Well, the only thing they got 2 problems they face. One is, the one hope they got is that if the economy goes down and people say we need a change. But secondly, the thing they got to worry about is the identity of the nominee. Now, I see in the poll today that Joe Biden's way back up on front in the CNN poll. And, Kamala Harris has fallen back to 5%.
I knew that would
happen. Bernie and Sister Warren are 14 or 15%. But at the same time, anybody that's seen Joe Biden in those 2 debates and who's a Democrat and who's a serious looker at politics has got to really feel a gnawing concern that Joe just doesn't have it anymore. And if that's true, this is going to be revealed at the election, at the debates in September and beyond. And Laura, this nomination is going to be over.
Quick.
I think
Quickly.
February is going to decide this thing. Mm-hmm. Do you notice that the New Hampshire primary, the Iowa caucus is first, New Hampshire primary, then you got Nevada, and then you got South Carolina. All of them occur in the month of February. Mm-hmm. And on March 3rd I think there's 14 states. I mean, it's going to be all these 24 folks. They're going to look like Custer's Command after February.
Pat, I've got to say, I actually think Jill Biden is running for president. I mean, I think she's the one who's actually really running, because every time you see poor old Joe interviewed, you know, she has to jump in and kind of save the day, or then afterward explain what he really meant.
You know, your candidate might be better on, I don't know, health care than Joe is. But you've got to look at who's going to win this election. And maybe you have to swallow a little bit and say, okay, I sort of personally like so-and-so better. But your bottom line has to be that we have to beat Trump.
It kind of reminds me of Pope Francis. They're always saying, oh, no, that's just the translation. He didn't really mean that. That's what they always say. Every time Pope Francis says something on the verge of, you know, a lot of conservatives, Catholics think is heresy, they'll say, oh, no, that was just a bad translation. So that's what Jill Biden does. She said, oh, no, I know you might not think he has it all together, but he really does, and he's the best for the country. It's a very odd dynamic with Biden.
I mean, and I don't dislike Joe Biden at all.
No, I don't either.
And he's sort of a likable guy, and if you've got an opposition, you got to have an opposition. Joe Biden has never been a problem in that sense, and frankly, I thought his crime bill in 1994 was a lot better than he thought, and as for his decisions opposing busing, he should have been in the White House helping me.
Oh, my God.
But so I don't know why he's got to, because of the nature of the new Democratic Party, apologize for a lot of things that were, that crime bill in the mid-'90s did an awful lot to dramatically reduce violent crime in America. It increased the incarceration levels, but a lot of folks locked up were responsible for an enormous amount of crime. But I think the problem is, if I were one of Biden's folks, I would really be nervous, of how he's going to perform in these coming debates, because that could really be telling. And I don't know what happens if folks sort of conclude, as they did, for example, with Robert Mueller, who obviously was a very sharp guy, head of the FBI. And I sat down in front of that TV when Mueller started to speak, and I was expecting a real good exchange with some of these Republicans who are both aggressive and intelligent and well-informed. And at times I felt sorry for Mueller. Mm-hmm. And so I think we're going to find out here in the fall whether these early indications were simply foot faults and gaffes like Joe used to make, or whether there's a more serious matter here.
Well, what's I think very telling about where the Democrats are right now is their inability to explain not just the strength of the U.S. economy and their pathetic attempts to dismiss it or root for recession, but their approach to China, or what they say they'd do vis-a-vis China. And Pete Buttigieg, who, my gosh, they have done everything in their power to prop up Pete Buttigieg, who can't even run South Bend, Indiana, let alone run the country. But this is what he said with Jake Tapper. Let's listen.
What makes you think China would make a trade deal with you as president without the kind of pressure that President Trump is now exerting with these tariffs?
Well, we have a lot of different forms of leverage in the relationship, but it's also a fool's errand to think you're going to be able to get China to change the fundamentals of their economic model by poking them in the eye with some tariffs. There is clearly no strategy for dealing with the trade war in a way that will actually lead to results. Part of the reason is that this is not what it's going to take to actually guide China into a different direction. This is about a lot more than just some tariffs.
Okay, well, Rhodes scholarship notwithstanding, Pat, if it was so easy to exercise leverage against China without tariffs, then one would think that over the 8 years of Obama, we would have seen that happen.
So, no, quite frankly, that both parties, and especially the Republicans in the 90s and after we brought China into the WTO in 2001, gave them every advantage in the world, and they came in and they carted off American industry, hauled it away the way the Russians did in Germany after World War II, just put it on the railroad cars and took all the industry and moved it to China. But I do agree with Buttigieg on this particular point. fundamental change in the structure of the Chinese economy and what they're doing, like subsidizing their industries and stealing intellectual property and shaking down American businesses and shoving out the fentanyl and a lot of things that they're doing because they're a communist society and communist system, and as Reagan said, they reserve to themselves the right to lie, cheat, and steal, and we're not going to succeed in altering their fundamental character in a trade deal. And this is really something we're going to have to debate. What we can get is some kind of trade deal which makes reduces our trade deficits and the rest of it gradually and to the point where they're not growing every single year. But in the long run, I think the Chinese system is going to need something like what happened to the Soviet
I was
system.
just going to say that. This is where Pat and I have been friends for so many years. You and I have the same train of thought on this. But my view on China, and it has been for some time, 20 years, is that we shouldn't be trading at all with China. I mean, I think Trump's a moderate on China trade, Pat. I would disengage with China, slowly disengage. I would treat China the way we treated the Soviet Union. Companies are already moving out of China. Every trade deficit dollar that we have with China goes to buy more weapons.
Well, let me agree with you in this sense. I do think China is it's an endemic danger. I think it is a great power which sees the United States as a fading power.
Yep.
I don't think it wants war. It basically wants to win control of Asia and Africa and Europe and become the first hegemonic power on earth at the expense of the United States without some kind of crazy war, which is what the British and Germans of the rising and receding powers in the first half of the last century didn't avoid. But I do think that you're basically correct. The United States policy, it should be to be dependent on nothing of vital interest or vital concern, to be dependent on the Chinese for it. We should become a self-reliant republic again. We've got a great country, 335 million people or so, and we should not depend on China, especially for the necessities of our national life, and we should gradually decouple from China. But I will say this, you can't do that radically given all the supply networks and things that have developed over the years. And if you just, put 100% tariff on Chinese goods and American businesses there started collapsing left and right, you would have a major recession in the United States as well as in China and worldwide. So you've got to do this, quam celerium, as we used to say in Latin, as rapidly as possible, but it can't be done instantaneously.
Well, and Pat, I think that, again, President Trump sees how this is going. He sees the direction this is going in, and he doesn't want to do anything precipitous. So when he says President Xi is a good man and he's working hard for his people, Trump's saying this because he, if it comes down to the China-U.S. trade relationship disrupting a chance for Trump to be reelected, Trump doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to tank the economy before the election. Exactly. But he also, and so that's smart. Number one. Number two, he knows that, look, it's either going to be the U.S. or China in the 21st century. That's it. There's no other country that's going to rise to the top. Now, people could write off the United States, say we're never coming back, we're weak, we're too fat, we're too fat and happy, or fat and lazy, whatever people want to say, but I'm not betting against the United States. Trump is very, I think, clear-eyed about that. He sees how big and how dangerous China has become, and he doesn't want war. But he doesn't want us to keep going down the same path we've been on before, which was a loser. I don't care what Buttigieg says. Yeah. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
I think what he's looking to, is my guess, is sort of a reciprocal trade agreement where the United States is better off than we were before he started with the tariffs and going in as an interim measure. But I agree with you. Anyone who looks at China in the long run should say, look, this is not just a trading partner with whom we're having problems, or it's sort of been disobeying the rules like some NFL team. This is a serious long-term threat to the United States, and we ought to begin to have a long-term strategy to deal with it. And I agree with you. Decoupling of vital interests, of our vital concerns from reliance upon China is an imperative.
We're talking to Pat Buchanan here on the Laura Ingraham podcast. Trump inherited an economy from Obama's that the Washington Post today in a big piece and others on television say was a strong economy. This was Obama's good economy that was then wrecked by Trump.
What we are seeing is that the proverbial chickens are coming home to roost. Donald Trump inherited a great economy from Barack Obama, one that was steadily growing. And everybody remembers the doldrums, the pits that Barack Obama lifted the economy up from. But now you have a tax scam for the top 1%. You have tariffs, which are bad for our farmers, bad for our businesses, bad for our manufacturers, bad for our retailers. And so, yes, I mean, what he's done is he's implemented his own policies and he screwed up Barack Obama's good economy. Thank you, Donald Trump.
Do you think that ultimately works, Pat?
No, it doesn't. It was
that's a weak argument.
It was pooping along under Obama, and Trump came in with deregulation and the tax cuts and the fact that people saw him as basically a friend to business, a friend to investment, a friend to growth, and not a quasi-socialist. It cut loose all the American energy. And look at, you shouldn't bet everything on the market, but look at the stock market when he came in and look at where it is now. And you can see that you had a tremendous spurt when Donald Trump took over as president of the United States. And people know that and understand that. And whenever there are problems they got with the president, I think they don't. I mean, you look at some of those proposals over in the Democratic side, I think that's the 401k is going to fall over and drop dead.
Right. I mean, we know that what the Democrats are selling doesn't work. I mean, all you just need to do is look at France or look at South American countries who've tried the same thing. It sounds good. Like, okay, I want everything paid for and we're going to get a bunch of free stuff and we're going to tax people really a lot. And it's not going to work.
Yeah, but there's a lot of Democrat. I mean, up in New York, the city is just all purely Democrats, but many of those folks they're up there in the markets, they're in business and things. They may be Democrats and like to be at the club and say we contributed to the party and isn't Obama great and everything. But they take a look at what's on the agenda for some of these folks, and they're going to say, "Look, I'm not liking Donald Trump that much, but we can't go down that road. That's the end of what we've got." And everything is at stake here, and we're going to pay a hellish price if one of these socialists gets elected president of the United States. So I think a lot of them are apprehensive. I mean, I would tell you over Warren and obviously over Bernie. I mean, Bernie makes no bones about it. He's a socialist, and he's going to change things dramatically if he gets in there. He spent his whole life. There's no doubt about his sincerity. And so, I think some of those Democrats up there, obviously Trump wouldn't carry New York, but my guess is he's going to get a lot of hidden money. I remember I was with Nixon during the McGovern campaign, and as folks found out later during Watergate, all these Humphrey Democrats were giving us money because they said we can't have McGovern.
I just think, again, Trump's approval rating, Pat, is not where it should be, frankly, with this economy. It should be much higher. He deserves some of the blame for that because I think he swings at every pitch, like people like Scaramucci. Like I wouldn't give Scaramucci the time of day. He's such, what is he doing?
It's like the heavyweight champion going out and getting in a bar fight or something.
Yeah, that's I don't. It's like Bryce Harper coming to T-ball game and like, wow, I got another home run.
Exactly.
I don't follow that, but that he's Trump's 73 years old. He's not gonna change. That's who he is, and that's just who he is. So, but nevertheless, he should be higher in approval, and
sure should.
And that concerns me. The suburban women vote concerns me. He did pretty well among women last time around, all things considered, but he's got to turn out those evangelical voters, Plus, he has to be ready for the turnout operation the Democrats will have among new immigrants into the United States who are, Bush has told us all those new immigrants, Pat, were going to be these, card-carrying members of the Republican Party. How did that work out in California and Texas?
Texas is fading away.
Yeah, well, how did that work? I just got back from California, and I had a fun time there, and it's a beautiful state. But, boy, it's certainly changed a lot over the last 20 years.
Politically, I've written many times that, when Texas looks like California politically, or looks like him demographically, it's going to start to look like California politically, and that's, I think, is basically the reality, and it's moving that way. Although what Texas has going for it that's different is a sort of a deep religious culture, traditionalist, conservative, evangelical Christian, even among the minorities, that California doesn't have, the West Coast doesn't have. But Texas is clearly moving, and when Texas goes, the country goes.
What do the Republicans do in the meantime? How do they protect Texas, given the fact that, we're seeing some, fairly disturbing trends there? Can they protect it?
Well, I mean, demographically, it's the Hispanics, you mentioned the Hispanics. There's no doubt that socially and culturally, they are more conservative in a lot of ways than the folks who are already here. Many of these folks, they go to church on Sundays, they got good family values, they raise their kids in good communities and things. But I did see a poll somewhere. They said, do you think the government or the private sector is the responsible authority upon which you should rely for your benefits and things like that? And overwhelmingly, they favor government. There's no tradition there of small government conservatism in the various countries now that are contributing most to the new populations in America. And I think as folks grow up and new citizens are created and people are brought into the polls and all sorts of expansion of the electorate takes place, the expanding electorate is not a Republican electorate primarily.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that, again, it's going to require – I think it requires something that's not happening now, at least through politics. Politics is just not where it's happening. Since the schools aren't educating kids in basic economics, that makes sense, not really giving a fair view of history. They're certainly not encouraging patriotism. I think it's incumbent upon, this group of conservatives working for Trump to do that kind of, it sounds like, maybe it sounds goofy, but kind of primary education. Like, why does immigration matter? And why does it have to be done well in order to help a country? One of the
problems, of course, is that the 60s, the left, the cultural left really went wild, and they were crushed politically by Nixon and Reagan. 49 state landslides, and Reagan had a 44 state landslide, and even Bush got a 40 state landslide. But these folks who have captured the culture, who captured the heights of the culture, have now, created basically by control of educational institutions and education and Hollywood and all the rest of it, they've controlled sort of the formation of a tremendous number of young Americans who are now middle age, and each new generation, I think, tends to be much more to the left than the generations that are passing on. And so it looks to me, there's a certain inevitability there. It's a very difficult thing to turn around. I mean, a culture like as powerful as American culture.
Well, again, it seems that we need to understand how we got here, and it's not a linear trajectory to this place. But even with all the media and the negative coverage and the liberals and universities, Trump still won in 2016. That's pretty amazing. Really, it's incredible. You got to think about that.
Someone said of Calvin Coolidge that his career manifested signs of celestial intervention.
Yeah. Well, you see what I mean?
It was miraculous.
I mean, can you pull off a miracle
Wisconsin,
again?
Michigan, and Pennsylvania. I think Trump's election rests basically upon two things. One is the economy, and the second is the nominee, the identity of the Democratic nominee. And under the identity of the Democratic nominee, does the Republican Party, the conservative movement, have the capacity to show the American people exactly what that would mean, given what those individuals, what stands they've taken, what things they've said, what they promised for America? Is this where you want to go? We know you got problems with Trump, if it were Trump versus non-Trump would win, but it's going to be Trump versus somebody else. And so I think they really have to go to work there. And I think Trump is not, and one thing that worries me is some of the polls now that show on the spread pretty far. I would not be worried if Trump is down to 4 or 3 points or something like that in an identity contest because of what some of the